First, I want to welcome Ms. Gupta, head of the Civil Rights Division with the Department of Justice, Cleveland, and thank her for being part of this. Today, this is a transformative time in the city of Cleveland with the Division of Police, and most importantly, all the citizens of the city of Cleveland. Today, May 26, 2015, marks a new way of policing in the city of Cleveland, one built on a strong foundation of progressive change, sustained trust, and accountability. As I've said in the past, our goal is to have real reform that will be sustainable. This agreement is a major step in getting us to that point. This agreement with the Department of Justice is a very positive result of cooperation and collaboration. And it reflects the ideals and inputs from many people and many different groups across this community, including the residents, civil rights organizations, activists, clergy, student groups, business and philanthropic organizations, elected officials, as well as unions, police unions, and the Division of Police itself. Even though there were differences on specific points, we all agreed that we wanted to have a strong and safe community where policing, both by the citizens and the police officers, are done in a way that it has respect and accountability associated with it. Police reform has been my focus and that of the city since I became mayor in 2006, and we've made some meaningful changes. Examples, changes in the use of force and creating a timetable for investigation of that force. We are changing our recruiting and hiring procedures to achieve the goal of having a more diverse police force that is representative of the population it serves. More than 500 police officers and dispatchers have received crisis intervention training, with an additional 100 officers to be trained by the end of this year, 2015. Body cameras have been fully deployed in the 4th District and is currently being deployed in the 2nd District, and all of our police officers will have body cameras by the end of this year. This will make the Division of Police in the city of Cleveland the largest police force that have body cameras. This agreement, however, gives us the structure and the tools we need to have comprehensive reform rather than doing one thing at a time. This agreement gives us the structure now to really implement comprehensive reform. In addition, this agreement takes police reform to another level and will rapidly allow us to rapidly accelerate our programs. It will also hold us to an implementation plan that will ensure success. We will have community policing at the end. We will have community policing as part of our DNA. And that will be accomplished through training in areas such as use of force, de-escalation, scenario-based training, community policing, bias-free policing, and search and seizure training. There will also be accountability and transparency through the Office of Professional Standards, Civilian Review Board, Community Policing Commission, reform in police investigation of the use of force, upgrade of equipment and technology, and again, in crisis intervention. Now, I look at this agreement and the reform in it not as a program. This is not for us a program. This becomes a way in which we do business in the city of Cleveland. As I said before, it becomes part of our DNA. Finally, I want to say that this is really a defining moment for the city of Cleveland and for the citizens of the city of Cleveland. It will define who we are as a people and who we are as a city. Over the last several days, the general peaceful response to the Officer Brillo verdict has reinforced my belief that Cleveland is a community where peaceful demonstrations and dialogue will and can provide for change and will make a lasting difference for the people of the city of Cleveland. In spite of all of what I've said, we have to continue to recognize that we still have the Tanisha Anderson and the Tamir Rice case before us. And decisions on that will be coming probably in the near future. But this agreement will serve as a catalyst for us to do those things necessary to ensure that we would not have to do these kind of things again or have the results that we've had in the past with the Division of Police and the citizens of the city of Cleveland. Cleveland is one Cleveland. We hear and we do with one voice, and despite our differences in views and points of view, and despite our differences in emotions, we've been able to be peaceful and united in the way in which we've dealt with things that have confronted us and the challenges. As we move forward, it is my strong belief that when other cities across this country address and look at their police issues in their communities, they will be able to say, let us look at Cleveland, because Cleveland has done it right. But I will say to you that doing it right is not a matter of any individual or just one entity or organization. It really takes a community. Anything that we've done in Cleveland that has resulted in positive change that has been substantial and substantive has meant a complete community involvement. And one of the partners in that has been the Department of Justice and the local U.S. Attorney, Steve Duttelbach, who I want to introduce to you and have present to you now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm honored to be here with Mayor Jackson and Vinita Gupta, the head of the Civil Rights Division, and with our Police Chief, Calvin Williams, to announce what I agree is a historic agreement that will transform the way that the city of Cleveland is policed for years and years to come. Although we've been working at this and we're here after 2 years, even more, this is not the first time that we have stood together. We stood together in 2013 to announce that the Department of Justice was opening an investigation, one that was caused by a series of incidents and requested by the mayor and others, into whether the Cleveland Division of Police engaged in a pattern and practice of unconstitutional policing. Then we stood together again last December to publicly present the Department of Justice's detailed findings and to announce that even on that incredibly difficult day, we remained dedicated to working in partnership to improve community police relations and to make policing in this city safer, constitutional, and more effective. And at each and every step, as this group stood together, as the mayor said, we never stood alone. Before, during, and after our investigation, we have all received an outpouring of support, information, partnership from the people of this great community. From City Hall to police union halls, from boardrooms to living rooms to police squad rooms, from churches to bar associations and even just plain bars. You have shared with us your stories, your passions, your insights, and most important, you have shared with us your ideas of how to bring this community together to improve policing and community police relations. And we have listened. I want to say that again because I've learned, and I think it's really the key. We have listened as a city. We have listened as a department. We've listened to each other. We've listened to people with whom we agree. And we have listened to people with whom we disagree, sometimes strongly disagree, because these are difficult and critical issues. And there is disagreement on the best ways to reach our goals for a better community. Mayor, that is a lesson that I learned from you over these last difficult months. that some of us maybe need to talk less, and we all need to listen more to the many voices of our community and our nation. And that, Mayor, that's leadership, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now, today, the Department of Justice and the City of Cleveland are speaking. And we are speaking side by side, still together, for everyone to hear. To hear what can be truly accomplished when a community listens and stands together for progress, even in the face of very difficult times. As the Mayor said, we have signed and are filing this 105-page comprehensive consent decree that, once approved by a federal judge, will not only serve as a roadmap for reform in Cleveland, but as a national model for any police department that is ready to escort a great city to the forefront of the 21st century. And even though we are speaking, what we are announcing here today is way more than just talk. The consent decree, this consent decree, has detailed provisions that will transform the police department by building on the best of what already exists, as the Mayor said, and there is much that is good, and working to improve policing in areas that may have lagged behind. The provisions of this agreement will help ensure that the many, many brave men and women of the Cleveland Division of Police can do their jobs not only constitutionally, but more safely and effectively, that they will be the best in the nation. Now, some examples of the areas covered by today's comprehensive decree, which the Mayor mentioned and which Ms. Gupta will explain in more detail, are as follows. First, with respect to the use of force. The Cleveland Division of Police will establish, train on, and implement new policies and principles that require, 1, that any use of force is constitutional and lawful, 2, that officers receive state-of-the-art training on the use of force and its lawful limits, and 3, that all officer uses of force are properly and fully reported and reviewed. Second, in the area of community engagement and community policing, the Cleveland Division of Police is going to establish a community-wide Community Police Commission that will work with enhanced neighborhood policing committees. So there'll be a citywide commission and enhanced neighborhood committees to provide meaningful input into police matters. The CDP is going to work side by side with these groups. These groups are going to be made up of both police and community members to establish a comprehensive community policing plan going forward. The area of support, equipment, and resources. We spent a lot of time speaking with people in the police department and speaking with officers. And in this agreement, you're going to see that working line officers and working with those kinds of officers and community members, that the Cleveland Division of Police is going to complete and submit both a full equipment and a full staffing plan to ensure that its officers are properly resourced. For instance, the Cleveland Division of Police is going to commit to modernize its IT abilities, and they're already working on this, and to improve its early intervention program even more to make sure that the men and women of the Cleveland Division of Police are poised to succeed in the 21st century. Next, in the area of accountability. The city will both reform its existing watchdog offices and form new ones to ensure that all allegations of officer misconduct are fully, fairly, and promptly investigated. For instance, these reforms are going to include revamps of the Office of Professional Standards and the Police Review Board, in addition to creating new mechanisms, such as a new Police Inspector General to be appointed by the Mayor, and requiring going forward that there is a well-qualified civilian, who is overseeing the Cleveland Division of Police's Internal Affairs Unit. In the area of bias-free policing, the Cleveland Division of Police is going to adopt policies and train on those policies that minimize the opportunity for the use of racial or other improper stereotypes in policing, including training on cultural competency and avoiding implicit biases, because we know that it's not just explicit biases, but sometimes implicit or biases that people are unaware of that cause problems. And the city is also committing to collect and analyze data on all its stops, searches, and seizures, aimed at identifying and eliminating any unconstitutional practices or actions in this area. In the area of crisis intervention, the Cleveland Division of Police is going to work side by side with the leaders of the mental health community, including by forming a new mental health advisory committee to train its officers on dealing safely with people in crisis. The Cleveland Division of Police is going to name, as a new position, a senior officer to be the crisis intervention coordinator. And it's going to develop a plan over time to ensure that specialized crisis intervention trained officers are available to respond citywide and 24/7 to all incidents that involve people in crisis. Under this agreement, all of these reforms I've mentioned and more in this agreement are going to be accomplished under the watch of an independent monitor, and the consent decree will only terminate after the city can demonstrate to a federal judge sustained and substantial compliance with the terms of the decree. And you'll see in the decree that there are very specific metrics and mechanisms for that. Now, the challenges that cause this agreement, that this agreement addresses, they didn't arise in a day, and we're not going to get rid of them overnight. Compliance with this agreement, which means taking on truly systemic change, is going to be, and I say this as a Clevelander, it's going to be hard work. And just as the commercial says, there's only one way to accomplish this kind of work, this hard work going forward, together. And that does not just mean the people and groups who are standing up here at this podium. And so today, I am issuing a call to action to our entire community to support this hard work together. Today, we are seeing courage and leadership that is worthy of more than just lip service. So together, we need to step up, and together we need to keep it up to ensure the success of this effort. And different people can support this transformation in different ways. Community members can support this effort by continuing to be engaged and giving their time and their innovative ideas to help improve policing and community police relations. Community leaders can set a tone of dialogue and partnership, encouraging residents to be respectful of the incredibly difficult job that the vast majority of police officers do with honor, distinction, and with courage. Police officers, the officers, they can continue to strive for excellence every day. And police leaders can continue to raise up those efforts at excellence. But police leaders also have to be open to the honest truth that as long as police officers are human beings, they will not always reach that standard of excellence. And that the people who might criticize the police are not the enemy. They are part of the community that the police officers are sworn to serve, and they ought to be listened to. In the wonderful business, civic, and philanthropic community, both in this city and in this state, which have had so many constructive things to say along the way about the need for this type of reform, they need to step up and keep it up as well. And to those leaders here in Cleveland and around the state, I say that this effort needed your support before now, and now with the specific plan for success in place, it needs more than ever for you to support the implementation of that plan. Now, with today's agreement, the Department of Justice and the city have come together to position this community for long-term and positive transformation. This community has been there with us all along the way. but we need you more than ever. We need you more than ever now to turn today's promise into tomorrow's reality together. Thank you very much. And I now have the honor to introduce our nation's leading civil rights federal law enforcement official, the head of the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and a tremendous supporter of both this city and this effort, my friend Vinita Gupta.
Thank you, Steve. So good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Steve, for your commitment to the communities that make up Cleveland, and really for the strong leadership and our partnership that our offices have had throughout this whole process. I want to especially start by thanking Mayor Jackson and Chief Williams, who are here with us today and who are committed to continuing the work to make the Cleveland Division of Police one of the best policing agencies in the nation. From the beginning of our investigation and through the subsequent negotiation of this settlement agreement, these leaders have had to make some very hard calls, but they have always put the people of Cleveland first, and we look forward to continuing to work with the mayor, his staff, and the Division of Police in the years to come. And finally, I want to thank the people of Cleveland. Over the past 2 years, we have gotten to know many of you as you have worked with us in this process, and ultimately this day and this settlement agreement is for you. Now, today's agreement reflects a commitment by the city and the Division of Police to work with the Department of Justice and the Cleveland community to transform this policing agency into a model of community-oriented policing that will make both police officers and the people they serve safer. The investigative team reviewed thousands of pages of documents, including written policies and procedures, training materials, use of force reports, video footage, and investigative files. And the Department of Justice also spoke with hundreds of community members and leaders, including representatives from the faith-based community, the mental health professionals, advocates for the homeless, and civil rights organizations, as well as city leaders, police officers and supervisors, and police union representatives. And these leaders and community members continued to provide critical input as we drafted the agreement that we announced today. Now, constitutional policing is the key. It is a key to building back trust between police departments and the communities they serve where it has eroded. And as you know, the difficult task of rebuilding trust between the police and the community is one that communities around the country are struggling with, and it is not one that is new. What is remarkable, though, about Cleveland and this agreement is that it reflects the decision of community members, law enforcement, leaders, and city officials to do the difficult work that is required to address systemic issues that can undermine cooperation between police and large parts of the community and thereby reduce public safety for all of us. Today, Cleveland demonstrates to the rest of the country that people can come together across perceived differences to realize a common vision of a safer and more just city. Now, with this agreement, the city and the Division of Police agree to implement comprehensive reforms in the way that the CDP recruits, selects, guides, trains, supervises, investigates, and disciplines officers to ensure that officers are practicing constitutional, community-oriented policing, and that those officers who fall short of that standard are held accountable. But I want to highlight a couple of key provisions that Steve laid out. First, starting with the provision on support, equipment, and resources for law enforcement. I start with that provision, and I want to take this opportunity really to speak directly to the men and women of the Cleveland Division of Police. The agreement that we are announcing today reflects the fact that you are integral parts of the community. You put your lives on the line each and every day and ensure the safety of our communities. Our investigation revealed that you were being asked to do this tremendously difficult work without adequate policy guidance, training, supervision, or other support, and importantly, in some cases, without adequate equipment. The agreement actually includes key provisions intended to address your needs and provide you with what you need to do your job. Following a comprehensive equipment and resource study to assess current needs and priorities to perform the functions necessary for the CDP to fulfill its mission, CDP is going to develop an equipment and resource plan for necessary equipment, including computers and safe vehicles, to submit to the independent monitor. And CDP will actively seek input and feedback from the Commission, from police officers and supervisors regarding resource allocation, equipment needs, and technological improvements. In addition to policies and procedures and additional training to better support officers in the field, CDP will be implementing an effective employee assistance program that provides officers ready access to the mental health and support resources necessary to facilitate effective and constitutional policing, given their stress on the jobs. On community engagement and oversight, so to community leaders, many of whom have really made significant sacrifices for the good of your city, I want to thank you for ensuring that the provisions addressing community engagement and community oversight of your police department are effective and meaningful. As Steve mentioned, the new Community Police Commission will represent the city's many communities, including faith-based organizations, civil rights advocates, police unions, the business philanthropic community, and youth organizations who will work with the Division of Police to improve community policing, bias-free policing, and transparency. Community participation is now key to the development of many important policies going forward, including those related to the use of force and search and seizure. The agreement also strengthens civilian oversight structures to ensure that civilian complaints of misconduct are thoroughly and effectively investigated and that officers are held accountable for misconduct when that arises. And the agreement calls for the placement of a civilian at the head of the internal affairs to help ensure that internal investigations of misconduct are reliable. We'll also be working, the Division of Police will be creating a mental health response advisory committee that will foster relationships and build support between police, the community, and mental health providers. We will ensure that all officers receive core training in responding to individuals in crisis, and that specialized crisis intervention trained officers will receive the advanced training. On search and seizure and bias-free policing, the agreement's mechanisms to ensure that CDP delivers bias-free policing and conducts searches and seizures in accordance with the Constitution and state and federal law include broad data collection and analysis so that CDP's activities are transparent and can be assessed as to be administered without bias. Community participation in the development of training related to bias-free policing is a model that ensures that policing practices reflect Cleveland's community values and priorities. There is no cookie-cutter agreement at the Department of Justice. This agreement reflects the input of stakeholders here in the city. Building on important changes that the division has already made on a whole host of issues to some of its use of force policies, the agreement also requires the division to provide improved training and guidance on when and how officers must use force. And officers must use de-escalation techniques rather than force wherever possible. The division will also improve the investigatory process following an officer's use of force to ensure that officers are using force appropriately. In addition, when force is used, officers will provide emergency first aid as necessary. Now, strengthening all of these reporting and supervision is data collection. We've talked about that. And we want to make sure that whether an officer has unholstered a firearm during an encounter with someone, we will be helping CDP continue to revise, develop, and implement force policies, training, supervision, and accountability systems. Now, thanks to the tremendous cooperation from the city, the Division of Police, and the community, we reached this agreement within a mere 5 months following the announcement of our findings, which is really, truly an unprecedented pace for putting together this incredibly robust and comprehensive plan to reform a major metropolitan police department. And as leaders of this great city, you have all demonstrated over the last several months a willingness to engage in the serious discussions with community leaders to ensure that the exercise of this power must be measured not only against legal standards, but by the community values and community priorities. While the city and the Division of Police have already started the hard work of reform, implementation will require sustained work and is not going to happen overnight. It's going to require continued engagement, as Steve said, and commitment of all who have a stake in Cleveland. This court-enforceable agreement will not terminate until a federal district judge has confirmed through an independent monitor that the requirements of the agreement have been effectively implemented and that the city has demonstrated that it can sustain compliance. But let me be clear. In light of the work that has brought us here today, I am deeply optimistic that transformation is coming to Cleveland. There is much work to be done across the nation and in Cleveland to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve where it has eroded, but it can be done. And today's agreement really should serve as a model for those seeking to address similar issues in their communities around the country. As we have done throughout the investigation and the negotiation of the agreement, we will continue to meet and work with the city, with the Division of Police, with community groups, faith-based organizations, the police unions, advocacy agencies, and all stakeholders to ensure constitutional policing and a more just and safe city of Cleveland. Thank you.
Questions?
Bottom line question out of the gate here, what is the total cost of making all these improvements, and how do you intend to fund them?
Well, there is a cost. We haven't determined the total cost. There's a need for capital, a need for monitoring, training, and operation. And what we're doing now is assessing exactly what that is. And as we move forward, we will also be engaging the philanthropic and the business community to assist us in helping us fund this settlement. Now, ideally, we would have all the money up front, because if we did, then we could create this structure immediately and then go to implementation, which means we would have accomplished our goal in a much shorter time. If we have to do it incrementally, it will naturally take a long period of time. And as you suggested, having the city bear that entire cost will not work for us, and so we will be looking for external help in that regard. Yes, ma'am.
Am I correct, there are going to be two outside, there's going to be a federal judge monitoring this, and then there'll be an independent monitor as well? And what is the timing on that? When does the judge get assigned? Is that today?
It's already,
Yeah, why don't you talk about
sure.
the judge? I'll talk
All right.
So we do know the judge.
So I looked on my, of course, we're never disconnected, right? So before I came out here, I looked, and it seemed to me that there was an SO next to the filing, so that stands for Solomon Oliver. So according to that, I assume, although I haven't confirmed, I just looked on an email that Judge Oliver will be the judge to whom it goes up a random draw, right? It goes into a computer and it comes out randomly.
Yep, and just on the monitor point, so the monitor will be the person charged with a team charged with monitoring compliance with the agreement, providing technical assistance where necessary, and reporting to the federal judge as to progress periodically.
And when do you think that'll happen, Ms. Gupta? And how does that group get formed?
Sure. So the monitor will be, there's a process. We hopefully will jointly select the monitor. The Department of Justice and the city will hopefully agree to a monitor. We're optimistic that that will happen. In the rare event that we are unable to agree, the federal judge will monitor, but we think that we'll be able to come to agreement. We want to move as expeditiously as possible, but want to make sure that we have the best pool of candidates. It's a very important position, but obviously the rest of the implementation outside of the ongoing reform hinges on us being able to have a monitor in place.
As you go, couple of weeks,
well, can we get another question in? As you go through this report, 105 pages, there doesn't seem to be anything in there that's new and innovative. You talk about police won't use neck holes, police won't unholster the weapon unless there's reasonable belief that lethal force may become necessary. All of that seems to be something that should have been in the police department to begin with. Can you tell me why it wasn't? Mayor or someone, please.
Well, I don't want to, I think everybody's probably entitled to their own opinion as to what's innovative and what's not. My impression, having worked with hundreds of police departments over 2 decades of time in law enforcement, is that there is a tremendous amount in this consent decree that is innovative. The notion that a police department, I'm just picking one of many things, would have a person that they would appoint at a command staff level to be responsible for the issue of mental health. The fact that you'll have a mental health advisory committee that is a standing committee to deal with the police on that issue, the fact that you'd be going for 24/7 coverage of people in crisis, the fact that you're going to have a community police commission where people meet regularly from both the community and the police unions in a room like this regularly to interact and have input into a police department. And then there are parts of the agreement that are, the fact that you have a police inspector general. I could just go on and on, but there are parts of the agreement that are less glamorous and parts that are more. I think the key, I would say, about this agreement is you have to look at the whole thing. You know, when you look at this agreement, you look at the 105. They told me to do it double-sided to save trees. But if you look at this, the number of substantive, real reforms that are in this agreement is just truly staggering. And as I said, this is Cleveland, right? I mean, this is real stuff. And so, you know, I think I said this morning in which meeting, this is not, you know, this agreement is not riding around in a convertible with a tan. This is hard work stuff that the chief and this community should be very, very proud of.
Can we hear from the chief? We'd like to. Yeah, can we get your reaction to what you heard and these implementations that are going to be made?
Sure.
Good afternoon. I think the central component and where the rubber really meets the road is the community policing component. If we don't ensure that our officers in our community have a better relationship, then a lot of what we're trying to implement now in the terms of this agreement are going to be hard to do because we have to have that relationship with our community. We have to have a better relationship with our community. And we've started down that path already. We started down that path about a year and a half ago, and we continued that this year with giving our officers basic level community policing training so that we all start with a good foundation of what exactly community policing is and what problem-oriented policing is. And we've trained all the officers in our district so far, and we continued that process into our in-service training schedule for 2015. And as part of this agreement, we will continue that training until we get to the level of all of our officers are properly trained and that we get that interaction with our community on a regular basis, and that our officers get out of their cars, they get to know the community, both residents, stakeholders, our business people, and especially our children in this community, which is probably the most important part of this for me. We talked a lot about the nuts and bolts of this, but what it really comes down to is, you know, I have to, as chief, make sure that that community policing philosophy is part of the DNA of the Cleveland Division of Police, and that's what I intend to do. So that's kind of how this thing kind of wraps up in a nutshell. If we get that done, then all the other stuff is easy.
Do you
Can
think
you
the
talk a
mayor
little
being
more about
investigated
how
by the Department of Justice?
Can you talk a little more about how the civilian oversight of internal affairs would work?
Well, we're working through the actual logistics of that, but I mean, we've had civilians within the Division of Police before. This is just a different, higher level category for that civilian personnel. But this just kind of adds another layer of accountability. Our officers will be trained better, will have more extensive training, and will be held accountable when they do things contrary to that training. And, you know, this agreement in total basically builds on the things that we are already doing. It takes us down the path that we've already started down. It makes sure and puts more structure in place for us to get there and to get there faster.
You talk
Does
about
accountability come to a screeching halt when it hits the collective bargaining agreement?
No.
Can either Mr. Dettelman or Ms. Gupta speak to any federal charges against Officer Michael Graylow that might be being explored right now?
I'll just say that the Department of Justice right now is reviewing the testimony and evidence that came from the state trial, and we'll be considering what additional actions we might need to take given the limited nature of our federal statute in this regard, and because it's under investigation currently, we can't comment further.
Mayor Jackson, you know within the Justice Department settlement agreements in other cities,
Right.
Seattle, New Orleans, Cincinnati, they're in Baltimore now. Even Cincinnati had widespread unrest before they had an agreement. The elephant in the room is what you addressed before, trying to stop that and keep it peaceful. What, in your judgment, might help make Cleveland different, that we stay peaceful while we implement all these reforms?
It's based on what the chief said. It is how we as a community behave. It's a defining moment for us. Who are we as a city? Who are we as a people? Who are we as citizens? And then what is our expectation of proper behavior? And I think we've demonstrated through policing over this past weekend and even 6 months or so before this past weekend that we have a high level expectation. We believe in in community expression. We believe in demonstrations. We believe in protests. We believe that people have a right to express whatever emotion, whatever anger, whatever grief they may have, and we support that. And as you have seen, we've done that. We've supported that by protecting them when they block the highways. But we also have an expectation of productivity and peacefulness, and we will not tolerate anything that crosses the line. So it is who we are as a city. And as we move forward, whether it's the things that are pending before us, the challenges, or new things that will arise, we believe that this agreement will help us work through things in a way that the community believes that they are truly being heard and that they have input in the new way in which we do policing. This will not be something that will happen overnight, but we do have the basic framework in place as to how we behave as a city and how we conduct ourselves as a division of police.
Can I say one thing in addition to that? Sorry, Ron, can I say one thing in addition to that, on answering that last question? Which is that I just want to, we have to be realistic and clear about this too, right? So one thing that I can tell you right now is that nothing, as long as people are human beings and as long as policing is as difficult and dangerous of a profession as it is, that nothing is going to stop tragic incidents from occurring. Nothing, and by the way, some of them may be, you know, incidents that are proper and some of them may be improper. And the test of, you know, meeting the promise of this agreement, it can't be and it shouldn't be perfection because people are imperfect. Okay, the test is whether the systems are in place to minimize the chances of that occurring, and then on the back end to hold people accountable once it does occur. And so the first time that something, God forbid, happens bad out there, you know, there's an instinct for people to say, see, nothing's changed. But anybody who is a fair-minded person who looks at what the city and the department are doing today and tries to take the position that this isn't significant, substantial change, I don't think, with respect to them, that they're really being fair in their reading of the situation.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. In December, you had some reservations that perhaps the Department of Justice's review has painted the police department with too broad of a brush. What's your reaction today?
Well, I really don't want to go back and clarify and correct the record, but I will say to you that there were disagreements that we had, but that those disagreements did not get in the way to us reaching what I believe to be a true reform. As I've expressed throughout this, my major issue was twofold. One, that it didn't go far enough, and two, that we wanted to have substantive, real reform that was sustainable, not just, as the U.S. Attorney said, some pretense of reform. So this gives us the tools. What this does, believe me, I welcome this. I do not have a problem with the DOJ, neither do I have a problem with the reform that we have agreed to. I do not have, because what it does, it provides us with the opportunity, rather than me doing things and the chief doing things one issue at a time, where you be able to say, or I would be able to say, we have addressed this one issue, but not having the kind of change that would make a difference in the long run. I wanted to get out of that. And so what this does, this really gives us a structure that we can now implement under that structure to get us the kind of reform that we should have and need to have and get it done in the quickest amount of time. It's just a resource issue. And it's a technology issue. It's a training issue now. It's accountability issue. All these kind of things is clearly on the table. There's structure in place to address each one of those things, and it will allow us to get to the end that we want to get to quickly as a system, as opposed to dealing with one thing at a time. That's why I really welcome this. Yes, we had disagreements in the beginning, but that's what happens. It's life, right?
Is there anything in the report that you can... Is there anything in the report, I wanted to see if you guys could point to things that have been tried and worked in other cities, and then anything they might have done.
And then this young lady.
Sure. No, I mean, I think that we have a lot of models from consent decrees in other cities that have worked in Seattle and Portland, jurisdictions that have also struggled with issues around use of force, around issues of discriminatory policing. East Haven, Connecticut, there are a number of things that are baked into this agreement. But actually, though, I will say, while the issues and the general structure are ones that we've seen in other agreements, this agreement is uniquely a Cleveland agreement, which means that we got, I will say, kind of an incredible amount of very concrete suggestions from the people of Cleveland, from police unions, from line officers, from community folks who came up to us with very concrete suggestions about ways to address problems that we've seen and addressed in other, civilian oversight. What should that look like? There needs to be more structured, institutionalized community engagement. So we knew that. We have models for that in other consent decrees, but we wanted the model that we were going to be putting into place in this agreement to be driven by the people of Cleveland, and that's what we have. There are a couple of things, to get back to the innovative piece that we haven't had in our agreements that I think we should feel very good about, which is the civilian oversight in the Inspector General's office. That is a new thing. I think that is very promising. We have an Inspector General model that's been working very well in New Orleans. It's a very good thing. The equipment review. We want to make sure that officers feel like they are protected in their communities and have what they need to do their jobs safely and effectively. So this equipment review is another thing that we've built in that is kind of uniquely driven from what we heard from officers and the unions in Cleveland. So there are these kinds of different measures, but a number of our data collection and the like are present in many of our consent decrees.
This one here, I think.
You talk a lot about accountability and reform the use of police policies using de-escalation techniques. What sort of accountability does the officer have? Because a lot of people we've spoken to on the streets have said, at the end of the day, if the officer feels like his or her life is in danger, they should be able to use whatever force necessary. So what changes there, and what accountability is there for the individual officer?
Well, okay, so there's a lot going on in your question, which are really important points. So first of all, there's a legal standard that allows officers to use force when it's reasonable or necessary to effectuate their duties or protect the public or themselves. And so this agreement doesn't change any of those things. That's the first of all. So police officers are allowed to, as Attorney General Holder said when he came here, they have the right to go home at the end of the day, and nothing in this agreement changes that. But it's not true to say that police officers are allowed to use, and never has it been true, to say that they're allowed to use whatever amount of force they think is right. They're allowed to use the amount of force under the Constitution that is reasonable to accomplish the things that they're doing under the Fourth Amendment.
Do you think we would have been talking about a Michael Brelo or Tamir Rice had this been implemented beforehand?
Oh, it's impossible to say. As I said before,
It would make it less likely.
I think, yes, it would put systems in place to make it less likely, but as I said, it's the same with lawyers, reporters. Human beings do these things, and by the way, it's good that human beings are doing these things and policing.
Can you talk about who's going to pay for this?
And I guess
Sorry, I thought you were done.
you did.
Yeah, I did.
So why don't we let you go ahead and ask the mayor? We'll let you have the second turn.
What is it again?
Could you let citizens and taxpayers know if you have any idea of the cost, and if is the city's going to take this to pay it, or federal government or state?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there will be a cost, and we have a general notion of it. I don't want to say now because I want to be more specific. I know that Cleveland City Council, under safety, and the council president have already indicated to us they want to hold a hearing. And in that hearing, one of the things they've indicated to us is that they want exactly what you asked for. What would be the financial obligation of the city? But it will be some millions of dollars. Now, at the same time, we're also recognizing that in order for us to be truly successful, this has to be a community effort. So it cannot just be borne by government. We have to engage, and I believe our business partners and our philanthropic partners would be willing to help cover some of that cost. But they're not going to do it if we don't present to them a real plan and then a real analysis of the cost of that plan and where those gaps are. What we will not do is get to the point where we have to shut down divisions of the city of Cleveland. because you're going to still demand the services that you expect and should expect from the city of Cleveland. And we're not going to get to the point where we close up all of our recreation centers in order to do this. So I believe that as we move ahead, we will have partners external to the city that will assist us, even though there will be some costs that we will have to bear ourselves. And then the gentleman over here.
Just a second.
Wait a minute, hold.
Hold on. We've got time for three more questions. We're going to start with Mark.
And then this
one more
gentleman
over
here.
And then a third one.
Who else didn't have a chance?
Somebody didn't have a chance.
If you're a reporter. Let's start off.
Can I ask?
Go ahead.
Mr. Dettelbach, you talked about a fully equipped and adequate staffing plan for the department, and that's mostly, we're talking about frontline officers. The unions have talked about not being able to fulfill their basic CARB plans at times. So did the DOJ's review find that there is an adequate number of frontline officers on the streets of Cleveland?
So our finding letter talked a lot about resources. I don't know that we went into making an explicit finding about whether or not there were an adequate number of officers. But I will say this, we made findings that said that there were significant resource issues with the Cleveland Division of Police, and I want to repeat what we wrote in that report. I'm very proud to be a Clevelander, and I'm very proud of the progress that this city has made in so many areas. You walk outside, you walk down the block, and you can see literally shining examples. But every bit as important as a new hotel or a new public square or a convention or a new scoreboard is an investment in a state-of-the-art 21st century police department that constitutionally services a community. And that is, while it may not be as glamorous as a fancy scoreboard, for real cities in the real 21st century in our democracy, it is just as important. And the one correction I just want to clarify about what I said, there's two different studies that are going to be done. A staffing study, and then also separately a resource and equipment study, and both of those will be submitted to the monitor.
Ms. Gupta, the Obama administration has been very aggressive in this area. I think there are 38 different actions or investigations going on in a number of states, and you do get some pushback from unions and others. What is it, and some people would say that these are local matters that the federal government should not be so aggressively pursuing. What is the problem that the administration is trying to fix that seems to be common in all these places?
Well, I think, so we have had over 24 investigations and in recent years, and we've had many before. But look, I think that the goal is that ultimately the collection of our consent decrees, the 21st Century Policing Task Force that the President oversaw just recently, become models for communities around the country to really learn from, to take corrective action, to not wait for the Department of Justice to conduct an investigation. I think that there is enough evidence out there that these are issues that are that many communities and law enforcement departments are struggling with all over the country right now, and we have a body of knowledge now that we've amassed through our work with police departments all over the country, small, big, medium, that really show what kinds of steps police departments and communities can take to address problems in their communities without waiting. And I think here really what is terrific about the work that we are doing not only in Cleveland but around the country, what we will be doing in Baltimore, what we did in Ferguson, is that our investigations and the remedies that are built into the consent decrees really are reflective, as I said, of the local community at hand. And it is through intensive engagement. And I will say increasingly, we are having very productive conversations with police unions around issues of reform. I think that they are recognizing that if the communities that they serve don't trust their officers, don't have, where there isn't mutual trust and mutual respect, that it hurts their ability, it puts them in more kind of dangerous situations. And so we are having more and more kind of productive, they're difficult conversations, but with all stakeholders engaged in the work that we have to do around the country on these issues.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Manager, one thing you hear a lot, when we hear these changes, hopefully they'll fix these problems. But when you're out there, you hear from protesters, whether it's Baltimore, Ferguson, or here in Cleveland, you hear people say they want changes, they want it now. these type of reforms aren't going to bring change immediately. What's your message to those people that say, we need this change and we need it right now?
I'd say more power to them. I actually agree with them. I agree with them. I think that we need substantive change, and we need to get it done rapidly. Now, to expect that we're going to wake up tomorrow and just be a whole different world is, I think, unrealistic and naive. But to believe that we can get it there quicker than what the system wants to get it there, I think that that's a proper demand. And that's why I commend demonstrators. That's why I commend protesters. That's why we protect their right to demonstrate and protest, to be angry about whatever. Because we believe as long as they keep their foot on the pedal and keep that constant pressure, that it will help us, including me, to be more cognizant of what is really going out on the street, what's really going on out there, and what the people are demanding. The people have a right to protest. The people have a right to demonstrate and express their concern. They have that right. And they have a right to demand of government a response to that protest and demonstration, and to demand from government the ability to change according to what is right. Now, all that being said, what I will not do, however, is stereotype in police as individuals or division as an individual. I won't do that, because there are men and women in this police department who do not police Pleasantville. They police an urban center, and we need to give them the tools they need to do it correctly, with the understanding that in doing their job, they have to be professional, responsible, and operate within the rule of law and within the general police orders and the policies and the training in which they got. But we have to deal with issues out here that will call for aggressive policing. But it does not mean that they should be unprofessional. It does not mean they should be abusive. It does not mean they should use excessive force. It doesn't mean all that. And whenever that occurs, and that's what this agreement is about, whenever that occurs, people should be held accountable for transgressing that law or transgressing that training. If you get outside the box, it's on you. It's on you. So I actually agree with people who say we want it and want it now. And I think
arbitration
One more right here, Layla.
What role did the community climate, the preload trial, protests, broader issues about community policing play in either the timeline of the negotiations or the substance of the negotiations?
Well, I'll turn it over to Ms. Dellebuck, but let me tell you, we've been at this for months. Yeah. We've been at this for months. And we would have loved to have had this. We would have loved to have had this done a month ago. But it happened now. It happened now. It's the one thing that we both agreed on. We're not going to do this and spend the time that we spent and have the outcome be wrong because we're trying to do it to address a political concern. We agreed on that. And so that's the way we conducted it.
Yeah, I just want to say two things. First of all, obviously the Civil Rights Division, who was also, the key in this, they were not focused, obviously, on some of this with the same intensity on the local. They have a national quality control program in place, and this agreement, they were not going to settle for anything that wasn't a model, and neither were the mayor or I. That's number one. I just want to also just validate to the extent it's what the mayor just said, which is that, look, we're not blind and we see what's going on in the community, but the work on this agreement, I think if you look at it and just look at the detail and the number of provisions which the law director and Civil Rights Division and my office negotiated, the number of lawyers who participated in this, the chief, the number of people in the city, the number of outside experts. I mean, this was very, very hard work. And the meetings and negotiation sessions on this went for months, and they were long and they were constructive. And one thing I will say, I said this before, is that, the kind of discussions that were occurring in that room are the kind of discussions that people expect from their government. They weren't about, oh, we have to do this because something's going on. They were about what's the right answer. You know, the chief saying, you know, if you do that, have you thought of the consequence it's going to have for my people out on the street? And us saying, well, if you don't do that, we're worried about the officers who are going to do something else. And it was really the kind of discussions which we have been having in this country since the 1770s about the balance between government power and the police and public safety, which are so important. So for whatever it's worth, it was really
Was
something.
the timing coincidental then?
Thank
Right
you,
after
thank
Reno?
you all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of disingenuous, isn't it, to claim that nothing.
Back in Cleveland, I think it takes a little bit of time before we accuse that, but I'm just saying, can I answer, Connie? So,
Can we pay attention?
Look, there's nothing to gain by sort of saying that it didn't have anything to do with it. The fact of the matter is that, of course, I know that we had stuff going on this last week in Cleveland, which had us all on edge. And, of course, we felt like we wanted to get a finished product out into the community as quickly as possible. But, you know, we weren't going to rush it and do it before the Brelo verdict came out, which, of course, you know, if you were trying to rush something and do it, you would try to do it before, right? And you know, it just wasn't ready to go. We worked as hard as we could to get everything right. You know, I think in the end, the substance of the agreement stands for itself. So, you know, I'm just trying to answer your question as honestly as I can as to what it is, but I don't think it was at all driven by the notion that we could somehow come up with this, you know, in the last week, or, you know, you're entitled to your own opinion about it, though.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.